Vin Future Prize, a new global science and technology prize for humanity from Vietnam. One Vin Future grand prize of $3 million. 3 additional special Vin Future prizes valued at $500,000 each. Vin Future Prize honors science and technology work that creates or has a high potential to create meaningful change in the everyday lives of millions of people. Join us to make a change for a better future.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests and beloved scientists. Welcome to the third Vin Future Innovatalk, where we meet, we talk, and we innovate together. My name is Chiang, and I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing and Communication of the Foundation. And today, in this webinar, our topic will be aspects of modeling COVID-19, understanding and quantifying the uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been our wish for a long time that we can create a place where all scientists from all over the world, or scientists from all fields of science, can come together and share the same interdisciplinary discussion to find out the scientific solutions for global pressing issues. And I think that the Innovatalk that we are working on is helping us to make this happen, to make the wish happen, because here we can see a lot of scientists from different scientific fields. They come here to share the discussion. And there is a fun fact. In the previous 2 Innovatalk, we see that there are so many scientists, they joined both webinars, both about the transgenic lifestyle and also about the precise cancer measurement, which are very different topic, right? But they joined with both of our webinars with the same excitement, same energy, and of course, they have a lot of great questions for us. We are really thankful for that, and we hope that all of you will join us for today and also the next webinars to come. And get back to the topic of today. Today we are talking about AI. I think that this is the very perfect topic for everyone to join and to be the parts of the conversation, because AI is existing in almost all fields of life and can affect all occupations. And we're talking about the ability of learning from data, and then we identify patterns to perform tasks, perform different tasks with a better way, in a better way. Coming to today's session, we are very honored, as you can see, to introduce to you our distinguished panel of this month. Let us welcome the chair of today's webinar, Professor Ray Buntine, Director of Computer Science Program, College of Engineering and Computer Science, Vin University. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
And we also would like to welcome our main speaker of today, Dr. Mishra from the University of Copenhagen, former research fellow at Imperial College London.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, our beloved scientists, very special in this webinar, we have the third guest speaker, and he also a very special present that we have to give to all of you, our audience today. Please let us welcome Professor Yin-Yu Ye, Katie Lee, Professor of Engineering at Institute of Computational and Mathematical Engineering, Stanford University. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Today we have a very special webinar. As you can see, I'm sitting here with our chair and special speaker, and also have another speaker online from Copenhagen. And I want to have the very first question with our chair of today. Professor Buntine, what do you think about the webinar, and why did you accept the invitation to be the chair of our webinar?
Well, today's topic is really highlighting the ability to analyze data with more sophisticated methods. We spend a lot of time looking at simple data reports in the early days of COVID, and I think now with the sorts of analysis Dr. Mishra does, we can get much better quality.
Sure. And a question for Professor Ye. If you can have 1 or 2 adjective or phrase to describe AI in our life today, what will you use?
I I'm from the field called management science and decision science. So if I were to use one phrase to qualify what's the ultimate goal of AI, it's optimizing.
Optimizing. Yeah, that's the thing that we all want to have in this life, right? We want to optimize every opportunity to do things better. Okay, thank you very much. And one last question before we start with the topic today for both of you. What do you think is the difference between AI of today and AI of the very beginning? I mean, in the 70s or 80s. What do you think?
Well, the big difference in the last decade has been deep learning, which has extended the capabilities of understanding. And in particular, we can learn features and learn aspects of the world that we couldn't with our previous methods. And it's really revolutionized speech and image and many things.
Yeah. And what about you?
Yeah. Actually, I went to US in 1982. At the time, AI was very, very popular. And we're doing some export systems and doing this language. But I originally planned to do AI, but after a few years, then I choose to do optimization, to optimize. I can talk about the difference AI today and the past, I would think first, we have tremendous data now due to the internet.
Sure.
So we'll be able to learn. In the old days, when we talk about the export system, we don't do too much export, too much data, not much knowledge. Second one is the computer, which Professor talk about. You have tremendous computation power now with deep learning. Of course, we have a new generation of manpower, including those like big AI in Vietnam, doing remarkable things.
Yeah. Thank you, professors. I think that two of your sharing will be the best trailer for today's webinar. Can't wait to start the topic right now. But we, ladies and gentlemen, and our beloved scientists, we have another trailer in the form of video to introduce to you the topic and also about the guest speaker and special speaker and chairs of today's webinar. And please take a look. Please video.
AI is the defining technology of our time, said Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. Since the term artificial intelligence was firstly introduced in 1955, it has come a long way from a far-fetched technology in science fiction movies to the milestone where it can literally transform and revolutionize all aspects of life. Knowingly or unknowingly, human beings are all involving AI applications in our everyday lives. The application of AI interventions impacts various fields of telecommunications, personal devices, transportation, life and medical sciences, and many more. According to WIPO's Technology Trends Report 2019, machine learning is the dominant AI technique, representing 89% of applications and 40% of all AI patents. Welcome to the third episode of VinFuture Innovatalk, where we are going to explore machine learning applications in managing health data. The webinar will be chaired by Professor Ray Buntine, Director of Computer Science Program, College of Engineering and Computer Science at Vin University.
AI is skill acquisition. The idea is the system must be able to learn new skills. So it's that combination of recognition and planning for an artificial intelligence that makes it work. The big date, 2011, which is when deep learning hit, and that was a whole new capability that we could talk at length about. But that raised the bar in capability and changed everything. There's many things that can be done. Medical science is, and well, actually any profession may change. I've got to point out that key players in that task are the current human experts, because we can never replace them. We'll be working with them in making them work a lot faster and more accurate, and so that's the task.
As the speaker of the webinar, Dr. Swapnil Mishra from the University of Copenhagen will share with us about his journey of modeling COVID-19, understanding and quantifying the uncertainty.
if you look at through COVID-19, one of the biggest challenges in understanding the spread and basically quantifying what has been happening in COVID-19 is that you are really not certain what's there. And it's not certain with all aspects. It's not just that you're not certain about this, you're not certain about the rate of transmission or how much really is the effect. Other uncertainty has been that you are really not sure about whether the data that you are getting is true or how much of lags there is data. Now, which meant you are basically in a space where everything is less. Neither you have got good models that can do good estimations, nor you have got good enough high quality data that you can do everywhere. The overall purpose is obviously the one purpose was to make a model and help in a way at that point of time the whole community and the whole world to realize what's really happening about COVID and people to understand the role of variants in a much better way. But the overall aim is not this, right? The overall aim is once we go further and to be more prepared for the next pandemic. So if something happens again, which are the right models to use? What's the right way to really quantify uncertainty?
Especially for this month's webinar, it is our honor to introduce the special guest speaker, Professor Yinyu Ye from Stanford University. As the KT Lee Professor of Engineering at Institute of Computational and Mathematical Engineering, Stanford University, he will join the panel discussion with Professor Ray Buntine and reflect on the sharing of Dr. Swapnil Mishra with opinions from his own experiences in the field. Coming soon on August 25, 2 p.m. Vietnam time, which corresponds to August 25th, 9 a.m. in Copenhagen. Are you ready to join our next Innovatalk?
Back to the webinar today about AI and its application in modeling COVID-19. I think that I keep having question for you because I'm really excited about what AI can do and is doing with our world today. Professor Ye, can you help me to name some of the innovations or application that you feel like really exciting that can make you feel like, wow, it still surprised you after a long time going with this field? What do you think?
Yeah, that I can think about AI really changing many things,
Yeah.
especially with machine learning and reinforcement learning. So we learn a lot we learned in the past few years more than even our past decades. So if I want to name a couple of projects I'm doing now, I think AI played a big role. One is I don't know, have you heard about Elon Musk? The star chain, the satellites, and all those space shuttles. We developed some tools for them when the space come back on the ground. So many people think it's spectacular when you launch a rocket to the sky, which is very dramatic. But however, the most difficult things is for rocket to come back.
Oh.
In the last 60 seconds, we have to optimize, re-optimize, balancing every milliseconds. Okay, so we need a very strong AI algorithm and optimization algorithm to just prior 2018, and it was not that successful. But however, AI algorithms, optimization algorithm, really helped them to make much safe landing right now than before. Okay, so another project which I'm doing which is also the Wing Corporation is doing, is how to use safe energies, especially how to encourage use electrical vehicles. Okay, so 10 years ago, we have a U.S. government. It's like an Electrical Power Institute. They ask us questions. If 30% of U.S. vehicles, automobiles, all become electrical vehicles, it's called plug-in electrical vehicles. If they just charge the vehicle at random, what happened to the electrical power grid? Does this create a danger, create uncertainty, create a risk? or could it collapse? So we actually took that project and treated it as an AI machine learning project, optimization project. The final conclusion is that charging cannot be completely random. It could be very damaging. So it had to be carefully managed. That will be good for consumer. They can charge the vehicle at a lower price, but also reduce the peak time. So that's the most important things, which with
Wow.
it is good for environmental.
Fascinating. I think through your sharing, as you can see, so science can be about the huge thing, like how for the rocket to go out to the space and then go back.
Yeah.
But science also can be about very small thing or daily things like our vehicles, transportation,
Yes.
like that.
That's
Right?
That's
And
right.
science, everything. Science can go with us in our daily lives.
Correct.
Yeah. And get back to the topic of today, Professor Bantine. We are talking about the modeling, about modeling COVID-19. And what do you think is the most interesting thing and potential thing that we are going to find out about this topic?
Well, I think it's important that we have better models and how they work. And we'll just get a bit of an insight of the extent of machine learning and theory that is making that happen. Because we'll have more pandemics. We've also got crime, and we've got many other things that operate in a similar manner that this kind of technology can be used. Yeah.
Yeah.
But underneath it's another kind of simulation sense, like the energy modeling that Professor Ye was talking about. It's a simulation of sorts where we watch how things progress and we can put in different assumptions and understand it.
Yeah, so we are in the very beginning of the journey. It means that we are going to change a lot of things, and maybe if the next pandemic come, there will be a lot of new things that we have no idea about it, right?
Yeah.
But if we can at least have some vision about it, so we can deal with it. And we really want to need your help to introduce our speaker today. I bet that you know really well about him.
Yes. Dr. Mishra. He's now an assistant professor at the University of Copenhagen. He did his PhD in the Australian National University, which was where I met him in early 2010. Since then, he's done, after completing his PhD, he did extensive research at the School of Public Health at Imperial College, where he rapidly built up a large collection of colleagues, international, I might add, and they produced a bunch of very significant papers in this area of modelling. Now, his primary work is at the intersection of global health, machine learning, and Bayesian modelling, which is the little area where I come from. He develops flexible and scalable models for understanding spatio-temporal. Now, that means in time and in space. And you saw that lovely picture of a map earlier where you saw the lights spreading over the map. And we have many epidemics in that area: COVID-19, malaria, HIV. So there's a lot we can apply this to. He collaborates widely with distinguished international researchers in global health and machine learning. So his work in machine learning is excellent. So also Professor Ye. He's now, as we've said, he's a professor of engineering at the Department of Management Science and Engineering at Stanford University. And this is also where he did his PhD.
Yes.
His current research interests, and really wide, very, very interesting gentleman, continuous and discrete optimization, and I will say most of my colleagues only do one of them. They don't do both. Also, data science, resource allocation, decision making, and many other areas. And for me, what's important about this is that you've got AI, which is gathering all of this information and maybe different ways of doing things. But at the end, you've got to make a decision. And that's what Professor Gay is an expert about, is doing decision making.
Thank you.
He's an Informs Fellow. Now, Informs is the Institute for Operation Research and the Management Sciences. And he has received many academic awards, and I could probably talk for another 5 minutes about those, but I'll cut that short. And just mention he did get the SIAM Optimization Prize in 2014.
Yes,
yes.
thank you.
So there are our speakers.
I'm waiting for like a day long for this introduction. Thank
you.
you very much for your introduction. And for now, I think it's time for us to meet the first speaker of today, Dr. Mishra. Please, Doctor.
Thanks a lot for nice introduction and providing this opportunity. And thanks a lot to Ray. I hope everybody can see my screen. Can see my seminar. Yes. Okay. So, as it has been told, I will be talking about aspects of modeling COVID-19, trying to understand and quantify the uncertainty. As Ray and Professor Yen has adequately pointed out, that now we have got much more capacity to do things. But the problem I'm trying to address here is more a place where at times you don't necessarily have enough data, or you might have less data than you would really need. In those places, and that might be the thing that's happening, how do you really get the estimates out? And that's what I will be talking about. Now, there are apart, rather than talking about a whole range of work in this talk, I will be specifically looking at a problem that we tackled in late 2020 and early 21, which was the rise of the Gamma variant in Brazil. And this is the Gamma variant, as we all know, is known as the P1 variant of the Gamma variant, whichever nomenclature you go around. And it originated, or it has its origins in the Manaus region of Brazil. Why this was interesting, or why this was fascinating? Because of this region. So what you see here is two graphs. The graph A is telling you in blue lines what are the excess deaths that this region in Manaus is looking at. And the graph red is showing you what's the total number of COVID-19 related hospitalizations. Now, what was specific about this place in Manaus was, by the time July or June 2020, people have assumed that most of the population in Manaus was already infected, right? So they were thinking like, oh, this is a place which has hit the herd immunity. This is a place where people are, where now it has infected so many people that you will no more see a resurgence. But suddenly around December 2020 late, my colleagues in Manaus are getting worried, and they're like, you know, we are seeing this resurgence, and everybody is baffled. They're like, why is this happening? And you can even think about this resurgence, what you can see from graph B, where you see the time varying reproduction number, which basically talks to you about how reproduction number is a thing that just talks about, that you can see as a measure of how disease is transmitting, how fast it's transmitting. And you see that for that thing also, although it started much earlier, there were periods where it was just around 1, but somewhere from mid-December, you are seeing this increase. And everybody is wondering why this is happening. And at that time, we all are worried, and we are like, probably there are 4 things that can happen. First is, we had that CEO surveys that said that most of the population has been infected. Probably that survey is not correct. Okay, that could tell me why this is going up. Other is, probably the immunity is waning. We all take it for granted now, but at that point of time in period, we had no idea how really waning immunity is, and what do you mean by waning immunity? Waning immunity is a thing that once you get infected, you are immune to getting infected again. But then over period, it starts to die down and you no more have immunity from it. So you are like, is that the reason that people got infected, but now they are dead? But then you are like, probably it's too early for waning immunity. But we were like, okay, let's see. Third hypothesis could have been why this thing you're saying is probably there is an immune escape happening. Again, this immune escape is something that is established now, where people assume that, yeah, Omicron is escaping immunity and not. But earlier, this was not the case. People were almost thinking once you got infected by a virus, you have got immunity against all variants or a lot of immunity. But here, we're like, probably that's the case. It's that people got infected with the default or the original, the strain, and now probably they don't have immunity, so a lot of people are just getting reinfected. Or like what people had in UK, which was the first variant of concern alpha, which we had it's just a more transmissible variant. So you're like, all these four hypotheses can drive this new wave that we are looking. But which one of them is responsible, or all of them are responsible? And how do we really go around? And to make matters worse, there was another problem in Brazil, at least with respect to data at that point of time, which I'm showing in graph A here. So what you are seeing here is, in Brazil, you used to get these reports, which will tell you on a weekly basis, what is the total number of deaths that are happening because of COVID, with COVID by in their records. But as a lot of people who work in public health, they will know, this data is not like a data that's once released and it's true. It's like a data, you release it today, then you keep filling it over time because a lot of diagnosis changes and things changes and this data needs to be filled. And the problem is this, if you look at this graph here, what you see the release in November 2020, 23rd of November 2020, the gray graph, it is basically telling me, if I look at it, I don't know anything. It's telling me, oh, deaths are going down. And that's what, if you would have used that data to model the transmission in Brazil, you would have got the graph B, which is like, yeah, the transmission rate is below 1. So everything is in control all. But this is the catch. When this data gets backfilled and it's again filled and it almost becomes stable by 8th of February 2021, you are like, oh no, it was not anything around things going down. Actually, that was the exact time when things started to go up. Now the problem is, if you use that data and you do that modeling in February 2021, you will again see the graph C, which is telling you, you see, the epidemic was growing, it was not declining, so we should have acted. But the point is, we can't wait for those 3 months. We have to act in December, what to do with that data, or in November. So in here comes the machine learning. We were like, this is the problem of nowcasting, where we want to know, where we have a value, but that value is not necessarily the correct value. We want to know what is the correct value. And this pattern has been observed in all previous releases of this data. And this data was being released by people in Brazil from the time like April 2020. So you're like, okay, probably now we can learn these patterns. This is where machine learning comes on, so that we know that if we see this pattern, the pattern needs to go up and we can just pre-fill it. So we developed a technique, which we published in a conference, UAI 2021, which was basically just now casting deaths, so that this gray dots can be corrected and become more closer to red dots. And actually the dots that we created, and then if we used our now casted data, you would have seen the graph D, which gives you the rate of transmission. And yes, graph D is more nearer to the graph C, which was the true thing that you should have done, which is like transmission is not under control, it is more than 1. So this is one problem where you need to act and where we use machine learning. But then this has not solved the whole problem. We are still in the thing, how to model the whole transmission of a new variant. Then we basically use a framework that we had developed earlier in early parts of 2020, which we got a Nature paper out of, and we extended that framework. In the earlier parts of 2020, that paper basically gave us a framework to model SARS-CoV-2 using a set of field called renewal equation, which is not necessarily just infectious disease modeling. It's a field that's been there, which is used in actuaries, geographic studies in there, and people use it. So we now went ahead and extended that framework. What did we extend? We first now allowed more than one type of variant. So rather than thinking all infections, all cases, or all deaths are happening because of one strain. Now we are saying, let it have more than one, and specifically here, 2 strain. Now, what we will allow? We will allow both strains to have different rate of infections. But we will also have a mechanism in our model so that once you get infected with one, it will give you some immunity towards other, but not all. Because we wanted to test this hypothesis whether immune escape is happening. And then there was a study that was done in England that gave us some idea about waning immunity. So we were like, okay, let's use this and try to see whether we can put this waning immunity data in there and see whether what can happen. So basically, in a very nutshell, the way our model works is you have got multiple SARS-CoV-2 variants. Each variant gets its own time varying reproduction number. This time varying reproduction number is the one that's responsible for creating infections. And then infections interact with other things and create death, right? Because only once you are infected, you can die, and there are mechanisms of you die, and then we get them in our mathematical model. The issue here is not to dwell more on the mathematics of it, but to understand a lot of this exists, or they come from different things. Like, how do you link infection to deaths? Is not necessarily something that just comes from SARS-CoV-2. This is classical survival analysis that a lot of people in statistics have been doing for ages. So we have got models, we have got ways in there to do. The renewal equation that we are using to get infections has been there for ages, but we have innovated here how to parameterize it for different variants to account for the different transmissibility and to account for the cross protection or immunity protection that we see. In a gist, this is how things look like. There is model, there is data, and there is inference. So first I'll talk about data. What all data we are giving? We are giving the death data, which is what I talked about, the daily death data. As I said, the death data needed to be nowcasted. So our approach basically so the death data is shown in the blue dots. You need to nowcast to get a better approach, which is shown in the yellow. So rather than see on the right hand side of this small graph, this dot being down, you basically are seeing that it should be up. Then our model also takes genomic information, which is about which was the first date when we think that this virus started, from the phyloanalysis, the phylogenetics analysis, which said that what is the start of this new variant. And also we wanted also get an estimate of what is the proportion of infections that we are getting from each variant, which is like the earlier variant and the new variant. These are fed to our model. And once these are fed to our model, what do we get out from our model is there an increased transmissibility for the new variant? Is this new variant having some immune escape capabilities, or everything is just a result of natural waning? And I will again repeat and try to emphasize here. These three are outputs. They are not exclusive. They all can have an interplay among each other. And the important bit was to identify how much of this interplay is happening. And the next what I'll present is our results of what we got, which we got to publish in Science. So what was the first result? The first result is shown in the graph here. What it shows you is basically that most of my data says neither my variant is a variant. On the upper right corner of graph here, that it is just a very transmissible variant, and it has just so that you have got full protection so that you cannot get a reinfection. It's just because it's a more transmissible variant. That's an area that's not supported that well. Neither the area that's just down there on the left hand corner, which is like this is an area where you get zero protection, which means if you get infection earlier, you will get it again. So there is no chance of getting any protection, which means your transmissibility, you don't need a more transmissible variant. What this data shows is most of the support for our Bayesian inference set, mostly this variant is somewhere between a variant that has got some immune escape probabilities and some high transmission. How much immune escape? Somewhere around immune escape of 25%, which means 25% chance of, which is 75% protection or 25% escape, which is like 75% chance of not having reinfection or having immunity, or 25% chance of having reinfection. And it's more transmissible by a factor of 1.5 or 1.4. That was the first part. Then the second part was we actually also found out it's not that this variant was just more transmissible and just escape immunity. There was also a reason of having more mortality risk, which does not mean that this variant here, although we are trying to say it's much more lethal, but this does not necessarily mean it's much more lethal. What it is saying is, during the time, because your hospitals are overburdened, and which means deaths can happen, what is the burden of mortality? And it is saying, probably if you got an infection at that point of time, not necessarily just because of infection being more riskier, it might be just because your health service was already at quite strained. You now have, again, the areas of high mortality risk and full protection, and areas low mortality relative risk and full immunity. They are less supported. The supported area more is the area which is seeing somewhere in between, which means yes, there was a higher chance of mortality, which again, there is uncertainty around whether it is just because of most lethal or it's just because of the pressure on the healthcare system. Actually, then we did a study in 2022 where we did this analysis across a lot of regions and we realized that it depends on a lot of factors. So here you should think it this way. But then, as always, anybody will ask me how really good you did. So what you see in graph C is our fit to the daily death data. And as you see, in yellow, this is the earlier strain. In green, you see in the graph C, the deaths which it gets attributed. And you see our fits to the death data is quite good. We are always covering them. And then you remember I had this hypothesis earlier that probably the CDO surveys were wrong or whether they were not. Actually, once we tried to see from our model the total infections there, in fact, even the CDO surveys aligned, which means it was, so yes, this was not just CDO surveys being wrong or biased. It was really an interplay of immune evasion, higher mortality risk, and high transmissible virus. And then, as you could see in graph F, what you see is that from the time in mid-November when this new variant came along, it basically was growing, which is what you are showing here is the timeline reproduction number. In green is the new variant and the yellow is the older variant. See, this variant is transmitting much more faster in the periods and then it suddenly dies down by the time it goes through. So basically, what we have established here is we have a model which allowed us to look at all hypotheses, test them, and more importantly, estimate those things from data rather than just doing simulations in a principled way. All this was Bayesian analysis, which meant we had uncertainty, which means we could quantify uncertainty. So it's not that I'm telling you it is exactly this number. As I said, like in graph A, it is somewhere in between and we have support for that. So this allowed us to have uncertainty, which helps us to make decisions and which lets us also basically explore alternative views. And this is what our framework has done. And this was the first framework actually at that period of time, which has integrated both genomic data analysis and epi data analysis in the same model. So this is what I see as the thing for future, how we can do. But still, we have not reached the end of the story, as has been said. There might be new pandemics. We need to continually evolve. There are limitations. As I said, although we use genomic analysis, but rather than combining two Bayesian models and passing uncertainty between models, we basically pass this summary statistics between them. So we still need to work through a newer model, and that's what we are working right now. Other is, we have not been able to use the phylogenetic analysis to its full strength, which means there are information that should talk about how different sequences are linked, which is not there in the model. So that's something that's missing. That's the current work driving us, and that's what I see is the work for future, or the future big model that should do, or the ones once we achieve. Although I call this model as a multi-strain model, essentially this multi is only a two-strain model. So we have to see how to do that. So the extensions that we are looking at is, can we do multi-strain models so that rather than two, can we do more than two strains? Can we do both phylogenetic analysis and epidemiological analysis together so that we can really use the relationship between sequences also? Whether we can do the inference of shared parameters, which is rather than just passing somebody from one to other, can we basically use that inference and provide that a bit more feedback loop than what's there? Those are the things. Now, there are many other things where we will want to extend this. The new thing is we would like to use information theory and Bayesian evidence synthesis to see, now we are trying to sample at random. Is there a more better strategy where rather than sampling at random that which person to sequence, is there exists a strategy where we can decide instead of sampling this person, we should sample that person by the objective of so that we can increase the precision of our models. All this will help us to basically maintain and create a generic framework that could be used for any disease. And this is what our grand aim or grand ambition around this technology is, where you can synthesize different sources of data, different types of data together and make and clear our understanding of the evolution of the disease. All this will also help us to answer various different things like what are the different roles of the properties, whether the intrinsic or the extrinsic properties played a role. How we can qualify the association between environments and the epidemiological covariates, that will become very important, and that's where we need to expand our model, use them so that we are ready, hopefully, for the next pandemic. For sure, the next pandemic will have new things, but at least work towards getting something that can work as fast as how we are producing the current data and use all that current data and synthesize this. With my last slide, I would like to say thank you. And there are a few other works that important that me and my group has done across trying to understand the spread of SARS-CoV-2 through modeling, which I've presented here. Now I'm happy to take questions and talk more with our esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mishra, for your sharing and presentation. And I have to say that I have to admit that I can always feel the passion in your sharing. Thank you for that. And coming back to our chair today, do you have any question or do you want to ask our speaker anything?
Yes. Well, I've got lots of questions, but I love the way that you brought in different data sets, you built a model to fit the problem, you adapted different methods. So you're really problem solving using the techniques you had. But what you're doing here is a post hoc analysis, right? You did this in 21, looking at the data you had earlier. And it seems to me this is very useful information. The information you're providing would be incredible for government decision makers, public health. So to what degree could you make this a real-time system? Is the data around? And is public health ready for this sort of analysis? Or maybe they're not yet able to understand or absorb the science or work with this kind of technology?
So thanks, Array, for this question, and which I think is a very important question, because as you said, at the end of the day, the most important bit is you have to take decision in real time. All post hoc analysis is good. It increases the understanding, but does not necessarily help you to have an impact on the policy that's happening at that point of time, which I do agree with. So a few parts in here, actually, for the few works that I presented, they were actually real time, in a way that our discovery of analysis of alpha variant that we did as paper, that was really real time in a way that it was the work that identified the variant and basically alerted the public health people at that point of time to say, hi, there is something happening and this thing is dangerous, you should act. And they acted. So I would say few of this work can happen real time. But a few of this work actually cannot happen real time just because of the issues around of things like, we are talking about a place in Manaus, right? It is in the Amazon region in Brazil, right? So you're thinking about, first of all, collecting genomic samples, then running phylogenetic. So first of all, collecting samples, then collecting those genomes, then running phylogenetic analysis on them. And one of the bigger things has been that people have realized now is phylogenetic analysis is awesome and it's great. A lot of people have done amazing work in there, like, and across the board, like across whole world, there are amazing people. But we have just increased the range. the amount of genomes that we have produced by analyzing SARS-CoV-2 is, I think, 100 times more than what was ever produced in the world up till now. So our models are nowhere near that we can analyze at that scale. So yes, that has been one thing where a community like computer science, AI, or machine learning can help and help those people out there who have been running these models to build the faster models so they can really upgrade with the data or the strength of data that's coming. That's one part of it. Other part of it is, as I said, nowcasting, which seemed like a small problem here. That is the real problem, right? Which I said was you are seeing things in gray, which is what you are getting out from your public health system. But it is a thing that will get backfilled. So you need a nowcasting system where probably is where machine learning or AI can help most, because this is more of a problem that AI and machine learning has been built for. A prediction problem trying to say where my point is. Here, you are not worried about understanding a mechanism. Here, it's almost like saying, you always know there have been delays, and these delays basically tend to give this much uncertainty or this many things, right? This is not necessarily a biological mechanism. This is just a mechanism of how your system or reporting system works. And this is something where AI could be used nowcasting, and that's what we use, right? We use actually Gaussian processes to learn how it needs to be filled back. So I think there exists a lot more opportunity to do there, and that's where we can fill in and help. So if those things come in, I think nowcasting and things, that's where we have to go with the real-time systems. But running all this full thing real time right now with the current available tools, we are not there yet, but that's what I'm hoping to do as my future direction of research, that we'll be able to have them real time.
Answer, and I'm sure that you will have more questions later, okay? But now I think that it's time for us to continue the conversation with sharing from you, reflect on the presentation of Dr. Mishra, Professor Ye.
Yes. First, I congratulate Professor Mishra for this very fascinating and impactful body of works on predicting everything. Okay. So indeed, pandemic and create unprecedented uncertainty for every human being. So and be able to predict something and tell something and give to some relevant authority to make a valid decision. I think this is beautiful and very relevant. Yeah. So if I have a question, ask Professor Mishra. Are we at the end of the epidemic? So most of these explanations are point explanation, infection rate, death rate, and something. Can we really predict the dynamics? It's like a time series or whatever. Do we already plateau or not? I think I found that would be very, very. Yeah, could you, Professor Mishra, could you elaborate a little bit?
So,
are we near the end?
Seems to be a difficult one, a challenging one for Dr. Mishra.
That's, I think, the most challenging question in general, and people have different views and different things. Have we reached a plateau? Hopefully, yes. Does our simulations and does our fitting says that it is surely a plateau? Probably not.
Okay.
Right. So, and actually, if you would have seen what I was trying to emphasize in all this work was the whole idea of doing Bayesian inference was to not give a point estimate, right? So not to say it is this, actually to say that this is this range and it could be anywhere. And similarly, it goes. Now, why not a plateau and why it can increase and why it is a plateau? That's a very difficult question, because I think a lot of our understanding is still not developed, right? Because there were periods in time when we thought we have reached the plateau, but then you started to come and see epidemic in other places. And what happens is what people tend to forget at times is we are in a connected world. We are no more living in 1900s. We are living in 2020, which means surely you can go and eliminate something from your region, but till the day it's not eliminated from the world, you have not eliminated it, because we have got so much transportation across, which can happen, right? For example, I'm not trying to say that this will. I'm hoping that the way people act and then we as a community act together, we will have control over stuff. But I'm saying it's just the fact that we have to aim towards global elimination. Anybody eliminating for themselves is not necessarily achieving anything, because you always have a chance because of the connected world. For example, right, we had thought polio to be eradicated. Now you have seen instance of polio coming back in Europe, right? So those things can always happen. So idea is to be about take an approach, not to be worried or not to be terrified, but keep your eye on and aim to get a global equity. If you can attain a global equity, that's when probably I would end up saying we are reaching a plateau. Because if you will do a curve of the world, probably you will see a plateau, but you will still find areas with large human populations still showing increase, and we should be worried about them. So we should think it's time to be more global rather than to be more national or subnational, is how I would say.
Yeah, good answer.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and for those sharing from Dr. Mishra, do you have any, to our professor, do you have any other reflection on this? And any other question?
I think my own reflection, I think in future choose a very good topic, which is uncertainty. I would say uncertainty is the biggest enemy for decision making. If everything is crystal clear, everything is deterministic, who need AI? Who need a machine to make decisions? It's how to deal with uncertainty. It is the biggest challenge. This is everywhere, even your trade stocks.
Yeah, so agree. I think that the moment when we realize that we are uncertain about anything, it's the moment that you have to learn more. And the more we know about things, the more we understand that everything is uncertain, right? The only certain thing is that we uncertain about everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to have any reflection?
Well, I'm actually looking forward to hearing our next guest.
Oh, yes, another special guest that we have invited to today's webinar. And if you can see in the attendee list and also the audience list of today's webinar, we have a very special audience. And let me introduce to you Professor Ho Tu Bao, Director of Data Science Lab, Vietnam Institute for Advanced Study in Mathematics. He has worked as a data scientist for more than 30 years, and of course more. And let's see if he has any question for our panel today. Please, Professor Ho.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mishra, for a very interesting talk. And I think I have some question. I think some question for you, but I also have an answer from your talk with Professor Ye and Professor Mantai. So maybe I just have a question to Professor Mantai and Professor Ye. When you work on machine learning and when you work on operation research, there is a general question. How do you think about the challenge in your research field applied to understanding better the uncertainty for COVID-19?
So, it's almost 3 years, is it? 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And we've now moved on from the disease to the treatment and the vaccination program. And our understanding has changed dramatically in that period. So for me, the big thing is the data that we need to do so that we can understand our treatment, our management of COVID and maybe future diseases like that, and also our management of the vaccines.
to try and understand their effect on transmission and all of that. So I believe for me, really it's about data quality and data management. And we saw a little bit of that in Mishra's talk, where he said they had to do nowcasting. And we see that in other areas where estimates, for instance, of some of the symptoms of COVID, or the lifestyle factors which make you more accessible to COVID, all those estimates can be very uncertain, and we're not really sure where we are there. Uncertainty is important again. So I think we need to better gather data so that we can understand the transmission of things, and that's what I think is really a new focus we need, because we're no longer in a situation where we vaccinate ourselves out of this particular disease. It's worked well, fabulously in the past. But what's happening now? Well, we now have to manage it. So I think we need good data to do that. And certainly the sort of techniques we've seen today will be part of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, Professor Mantai, and also thank you for the question from Professor Ho Dubao. And if you have another question, you can share with us. Do you have any other question for our professor?
I think that's okay. I want to
Oh,
spend
yeah.
time for other.
Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. Once again, thank you, and we'll come back to today's webinar. So, as you just said, we need to gather the information and the data for maybe the next thing to come, because we was uncertain. So, of course, we had some mistake on the way, quantifying and understanding the uncertainty. So, what will be the lesson for us for the next pandemics or epidemics to come?
Yeah. So in my field, just like Professor Hong asked, we are in operation research, decision science, management science. We have to deal with uncertainties. Okay. Professor Ray elaborate how to get good data, good quality, and the input. But in our operation research, in our field, we always assume data is uncertain. But given you'll never be able to predict 100% correct, can you still make a good decision? So we use decision making to compensate unpredictability of certain things in the world. You never predict what Putin is going to do next, but you still have to deal with it. So in our field, we developed a lot of at the decision level, decision models. For example, like a stochastic optimization. We assume data is not fixed. Can we still make a good decision by using statistical average? We also control the risk. In many fields, uncertainty means risk. That risk to your decisions. Then, for example, in financial engineering, we do a lot of financial decision science. How to trade the stocks, how to buy options, how to hedge against the risk. This is all the decision model developed for dealing with uncertainties. Another thing I would like to emphasize is when you make a decision, you're not going to make a decision today. You have to consider futures. And uncertainty. You actually make a sequence of decisions. We usually call the Markov decision process. You actually make a policy. It's like you play a chess, okay? Play a Go game. You're not only consider right now which movement I'm going to make. You have to foresee what's going to happen next, what happen after next, what happen. So you deserve a very good sequence of good decisions. depending on what happened. So, of course, the algorithm has to be very, very fast. To me, and for government now, even dealing with the pandemic, we have to develop a sequence of policy decision strategies. What happened if this is not over? What happened if another pandemic is coming? All this has to be sorted out, prepared, and carefully planned.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your answer. And we also have one person raising hand from the attendees. Can we invite Professor or Mr. Philip Rees to raise the question for our chairs and speakers?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't get my my video working. So I'm Professor Philip Rees, Emeritus Professor at the University of Leeds. And I'm interested in COVID-19 because I'm writing a book with a colleague, a geneticist colleague, to share all this knowledge that's been generated with a wider world. That's why I've attended this seminar. Now, thank you, Professor Mishra, for a very good presentation. I'll follow that up by looking at your extensive list of publications. But my question, which I submitted to this discussion, was as follows. I've been looking at excess deaths estimates during the pandemic, and they've been building up. The Economist magazine in London has used AI extensively to generate alternative estimates of excess deaths, which of course are much, much higher than the reported deaths. And this is followed by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation of Washington, Global Burden of Disease team, and they've produced another set of estimates which wasn't based on AI. And finally, the World Health Organization has produced a third set of estimates after a lot of pressure from interested parties throughout the world that they needed an official view. Those views are, of course, produce excess deaths much greater than the reported deaths, but they disagree substantially among each other. So that the Economist has the highest excess deaths forecast or predictions. The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation is in the middle, and WHO is in the bottom. So my question is, would it be sensible in reporting this in my book to average those three alternative forecasts to get a better view of what's been happening over the pandemic across the world in every country?
My first simple answer, of course, I'm not an expert in this area, but usually what we do is we've got multiple experts. So as you saw with Dr. Mishra's plots, you've got multiple points on your plot. So you can average, but really you have to say, oh, there's all these possibilities. There's an upper limit and a lower limit, and that is the kind of information that our decision makers would then use. So I wouldn't produce a single number. I'd report all three. Yeah.
So if I'm a short answer from my side is, first of all, I think all those three estimates actually produce a range of estimates. They don't give a single number. They actually all give a range of estimates for each country, which means averaging them is by default not necessarily the right thing. Yeah. And considering WHO estimates to be independent of economist reports might not be the right thing. If you go and look at so first of all, WHO reports was produced, let's say not everything, but the method was produced by John Wakefield, giant of a guy, but one of the most humble guys around, had everything open source, had everything put there. He has put his thing out that how he has produced and he's actually probably one of the best persons to do small area estimation. That's what is being done, what you're trying to do in there. And he produces a range of estimates. Those estimates in that team is actually the economist team which has produced the estimates. So it's not just the estimates by WHO, it's an estimate by WHO in collaboration with a scientist at University of Washington, who is probably the giant in the field, aligned with the economists, people who have been doing a lot of work. So that estimate has got few things in there. IHE estimates has have been produced by the team at IHE. They have got its things and variations. None of them is correct at one place, and it's not like you can pick one of them. Few of them have got few things right, few of them have got few things wrong, and that is fine, right? That's how the science is supposed to happen. But none of them give a point estimate. So summarizing that as one number might be the biggest mistake that's being done, and you have to again keep your point in here. All this might again change when we get better data about what happened in 2 years. We are still working out to extract data from a lot of countries where we don't produce those. What is excess deaths? Excess deaths is the death that you're trying to say. What is the more number of deaths I've got this year than I would have expected? Now, what is the reference for expectation? For few countries, high-income countries and developed healthcare, those you know exactly what's happening because they have got good data, they do a lot of those things. But as soon as you go to places where you don't even have more than 10 or 20% of deaths are not even reported annually, leave aside COVID, it's about general estimates. Or you go to a region where only 10 or 20% of your deaths are medically examined. You don't have estimates, and then this will keep evolving. That's the reason for uncertainty. We have to, as it has been told, and this is what people have to think, don't look for a number. You have to look for a range, you have to look for an uncertainty, you have to embrace that. And once you take it in your hands and you're happy to hug it, that's when you have to take a decision. And decision, as I just rightly told, you look at best case, worst case, average case, and that's how you go around it. So putting a single number might be the worst thing that we should be doing. And it might be a disservice to people who have produced, because they have actually produced an estimate in range for each specific country also, and they have listed their assumptions also. So a lot of things has happened there. Let's not just read one number and be done with it, is how I would say, especially when we are trying to communicate. Normal scientific people can, but we as scientists, it's our duty to get it in a way that people should read it properly, and few people are doing it, we should help them more to do it.
Because that could be biased. We actually want you to report multi-point, multi-scenarios, ideally with some kind of a probability distribution with each scenario, how likelihood they're going to be occur. Because on the decision models, we have a lot of tools to dealing with this distributed multi-scenario, the environment. We have a dynamic Markov decision process. We have a distribution robustic optimization. We will take care of those. You don't need to do any aggregation. Give us the single point. We want you to give unbiased, distributed, multi-different views. Even more diversified, even better.
Thank you for your answer and your sharing. And I also think that regarding the art of collecting, gathering data, we also have the question from Professor Phúc Phạm Đức. So this is the question for our speakers. Can you tell us more about how to integrate data from different fields or areas, for example, human health, animal health, environment, social, economics, etc., to achieve accuracy and timeliness? And is the issue of security a big concern? Yeah, that's the question for both of our speakers. Yeah, maybe Dr. Mishra will give the sharing first.
Yeah.
So again, as a generic answer is, there does not exist a single way, right? When you are integrating a lot of different sources, you have to think what you're integrating, how you're integrating, and you have to link around the mechanism, right? So this has been a growing theme. I say there are two worlds. One is a mechanism world where you know exactly how things are happening. There's a machine learning or a data-driven world where you look at data and get things. Probably the right way to do is a semi-mechanistic world, which is like somewhere in between. You have a mechanism because a lot of things in biology, physics needs a mechanism because you have to do that. So once you are integrating data, that's one thing. Is security an issue? Security is always an issue, will always be an issue. But the question is, do we need everything that is handling our security? Do we need to really go and identify people? Probably not. A lot of these models can really work on aggregates where we don't necessarily need to know who the person is. We just, at times, we just need to know what their age is and what thing is there. So that will take, so at times you have to just not think about whether security, I have to think about, do I really need everything or I can get away with a part of it? So that's one part. Yes, synthesizing a lot of data together helps you to make accurate. At times, even it helps you to make even more uncertain estimates. And as few people will agree, at times that's more important. So not at times accuracy is actually about being more uncertain. So that's what this help you also, especially. Now their case changes from time to time how to integrate. Like as I've shown in this work, we tried to integrate the normal epi model about who got infected, like total number of infections and the what came from genomics. Now, if I had to integrate social factors or economic factors in there, now question is whether you directly involve it at the mechanism level or you go and build a two-stage model that will first let you do mechanism, get your estimates there, and then on the second stage, you look about your effects of social and environmental effects. That also works. Which of one of them is better? It always changes with respect to what you are doing. So it's not just about integrating, it's also about knowing what you want and what you are aiming for and what's your answer. So you have to take all that into account before doing all this, is how I would say.
First off, he's made very good points about you need a model to how you're going to combine your data, and there's various versions of that he was talking about.
Yeah.
In terms of the security aspect, one thing I'm not sure we've raised yet is, I talked earlier about data quality, and so the issue is with data quality. Yes, we always have uncertainty in our data, but sometimes we have systematic uncertainty. And that happens when different people collecting data, maybe they've got their own biases. Or the example given there, if you're in a country with a very poor health system, they can't collect the data. You know they're going to be underestimating. Then you have to figure out how much they're underestimating. In another country, maybe they produced their own vaccines, and they were biased towards their own vaccines. You know, that's just an example. I don't know, but we want to look at data quality, and in terms of security, think about what may be the errors in this data and where could they be. So that's an extra layer of modelling is what we call data quality particularly in the medical informatics area.
Let's talk a little bit. Yeah.
So one thing I can add is on the data collection issue is, can we develop some kind of model to make a decision, still keep individual or data center the privacy? So can we still estimate something without direct access to the raw data, to the original data? So there was quite a number of decision estimation model, for example, federated learning, okay, and some other distributed computation, use gradient method. Yes, we have such a tools. So this is to address the safety of the data or security of the data, because people don't want to share data, because they don't want to directly report to you. They don't want you centralize all the data. They want to keep their own data in a private decision, but they can still answer some questions. So yes, many algorithms, many models are developed to address those issues.
Yeah, well, we are looking more detail in data. We talk about the quality of the data, and I have also the question about the data from Dr. Hạnh Hoàng from the Post and Telecommunication Institute of Technology in Hanoi, Vietnam. The question is: in calculation models, in addition to the role of algorithm, how does the shape data play in the relationships of the object data? For example, the graph data model.
Graph data.
Yeah, that's just an example. So the question is, how does the data model play in the relationship of the object data?
Ray, you understand the question?
I'm not sure I
Yeah.
understand.
Okay, so the second question, or maybe Professor Dr. Hạnh Hoàng, you can directly ask the question on online with us for our speaker and chairs, because we're just afraid that we will take it wrong. The meaning of this question.
Yeah, I don't think I can interpret it. But the point is, you have a data model,
Yeah.
which is how you put together. And Dr. Mishra had his model there, where he had a number of components, and he was modeling multivariance, and he was modeling progression. So that's his model. But then you've got the data that's coming in. And you may have data that's being used to pre-develop the model. So I think the question might be about the interaction between the model you have and the kind of data you're getting, and is there a mismatch that's I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard that something. I think that Dr. Hạnh Hoàng should say something, right? I can hear.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hello.
his
Thank you
voice.
very much for inviting me. So my question is simple, because when we talking about the learning model, normally we focus a lot about the algorithms.
Yeah.
But the role, as you also mentioned, and also others panelists also mentioned, that the roles of the data quality is also very important for the model when they are running again the data. My question is about the importance of the data model when we consider to build your learning model, because the data model is very important to eliminate the mixing information, integration of data, like also Professor Mishra also mentioned. And recently, the graph data model become a very good model that could be good candidate for the learning model. We know we heard about the graph data science or something, and we also witness the AI, the new AI application using the graph data model for representing the data, especially when the data come from different sources. The role of ontology, the role of model. So I would like to add that, because in this scenarios, the data come from very different sources, right? Well, fascination from patient, from the public health, and how, because this help a lot in terms of the data integration. So what about your opinion about like graph data model in the learning model that you are developing?
So I can help there. Maybe Dr. Mishra is still suggesting to add new parts to his model. So currently he has the two data sources. So the modeling aspect there is actually quite a lot simpler. If he was to bring in more characteristics, for instance, different spatial regions, he's talking about bringing in more of the phylogenetic characteristics of the variants. perhaps more measurements on the degree of not just deaths. Maybe they bring in hospitalizations or other things. So once they bring in all of those other things, and maybe now we've got spatial relationships, maybe we're bringing drugs in. Once we add all of those other things, that's when you'd bring in a graph model, which allows multiple entities, multiple relationships to be modeled. And I know in a lot of medical applications, once you move out of radiology and you start dealing with full medical health records, those sorts of graph models are very widely used. But I think we'll see in this pandemic modelling, there's probably a few more layers to go before they would actually use them. I think there's still, that maybe he's adding the spatio aspect to it as well, which to a first order doesn't really use graphs.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your question, Dr. Hạnh Hoàng, and also thank you for your answer, Professor Van Tijn. And I wish that we can have like 1 or 2 days of questions so we can be uncertain about everything and ask everything to each other. But we have limited time, and I think that a lot of more questions you can send to our email or to our fan page and other social media network to so we can process them and send them to our professor later after this webinar. For now, I think that I really want you to share something to wrap up today's webinar.
I will say I just loved the story. That was science by storytelling, and that was exceptional. So congratulations, Dr. Mishra. That was very informative.
Yeah. I would just add, and very thankful for VinFuture organize this event. Overall, I feel the Vin University is in the best position to tackle these things, especially dealing with uncertainty in health science. I'm here only about 2 weeks, but I already meet outstanding scientists in the health schools, which is one of the best, one of the early schools. Now also, I'm visiting CECS, which is the best data analytical AI and also optimization. So I feel Vin University is in the best position to bring these two groups. As we said, so AI is not just one group, it's multidisciplinary, multi-things. As you can see, Professor Mishra's talk, you really need both domain knowledge and the domain expert, and also data scientists from outside combined to predict this wonderful result. The bottom line is, I think Vin University is in the best position to continue this string of research.
Good.
Thank you for your sharing. We, after all of the sharing, we realized that this is not only a talk about AI. It's not only a talk about COVID modeling, but it's a talk about optimizing, about decision making, about gathering high quality data for the future. And there are many more things that we can talk about. We are from different fields, but we can still sit down together and talk about the same discussion. And Dr. Mishra, do you want to share anything with us at the end of the webinar today?
First of all, I'd like to thank the VinFuture Foundation for inviting me, specifically Ray for having me and giving me a chance to present. I think as both Professor Yin and Ray has covered a lot, I would just like to say the same thing in a different way. It is the time that people from other communities like AI, machine learning, data science, they should go and talk to a lot of domain people. We have things that can help people, and people have things that can help us. So it's the time to talk more across disciplines, across things, so that you can really solve a problem that's at the heart of that's the heart of people that needs to be solved. So just talk more, not just within your department, within your section. Go and talk to people across different buildings, across different places. That's when you get to do work that's important, and you learn and you make others learn. That's how we're going to be solving the problems for next many years is what I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mishra, for your presentation. Very passionate one. And we hope that we can have the chance to talk to you and have more webinars with you in the future. And I would like to say thank you to our special speaker, Professor Ye, for today. It's really our honor to have you with the WinFuture Foundation in this occasion. And really thank you, our chair, Professor Valentine, for spending time with us, not only in this webinar, but before that, to help us with a lot of things so that we can have a successful webinar like today. And right now, I really want to have the group photo between all of us. So I really want to invite all of you to turn on the camera so we can have the group photo. Professor Ho, Professor and Dr. Hạnh Hoàng and Dr. Mishra, everyone can turn on your camera so we can have the group photo together. We will spend like several seconds for all of you to turn on the camera.
Oh, okay. Group within a group there.
Yeah. Professor, we can see a lot of people here. Đỗ Phương Nam, Đỗ Thanh Hà, Đặng Nghị, Đức Phan, Jacob, Đào Toàn, Đạt Nguyễn Công, Đỗ Hữu Tiến. A lot of people. Please turn on the camera so we can see your face before we end up today's webinar.
You might have to do some.
They don't like photo shoot. I guess they are joining maybe from their house. Yeah, right?
Right. So,
and we have some time zone, maybe
with some privacy issues.
Privacy issue. Don't worry, we are not going to get together these kind of
We can Photoshop.
That's right.
Okay, so now we will smile to have a photo together. 1, 2, 3, smile.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you very much, all of our professor. Thank you, our audience. And please feel free to send us your experiences, your opinion, and even your initiative and technologies relating to the topic to our email office at winfutureprize.org. Thank you very much. And now it's time to say goodbye and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.